Cognitive control, also known as executive control, is a phenomena in the field of psychology and neuroscience that explains the cognitive behavioral control that humans learn during their span of their life in order to control their behavior based on set rules, regulations, or set goals that they have. The high-order executive functions require a simultaneous collaborations of lower and more basic level of executive functions, such as planning or thinking logically, thinking intelligently, etc. Cognitive control tends to develop throughout the lifespan of a human, and it tends to not be as mature in the earlier lifespan of a human, because it's very much correlated with the prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal cortex doesn't mature or reach its peak maturation until we are around 25 up to 30 years of age. And for that reason, cognitive control is one of the latest maturation cognitive processes that exist in humans. For example, there are probably a lot of things that you do not do today in comparison to when you were a child. Let's say in a social gathering, probably you are more behaved than when you were a kid. That is because the prefrontal cortex is not as developed, hence cognitive control is not as developed. We also see cognitive control being impaired in individuals who are, for example, addicted, or those who suffer from attention disorders, or the individuals with autism. That is also when these cognitive control processes are impaired depending on the individual. In addictive behavior, for example, cognitive control is also impaired because a lot of the behaviors are associated and connected with the reward system. In other words, the behavior changes based on the rewards that the individual gets. In the healthy individuals, on the other hand, cognitive control develops as we mature, as we learn new skills, and as we become more and more attentive. So every time during our developmental phases when we learned new skills, that is when our cognitive control also matured with time. In the fields of psychology and neuroscience, it is known that the peak cognitive control is reached in a healthy individual and during the ages 20 to 29. And during this period is also when individuals can perform some of the most challenging mental tasks. In this particular study that we are covering today, these researchers used EEG as well as fMRI, functional MRI, to read and measure the brain to see what happens during these cognitive control tasks that are related to, for example, an individual performing these tasks. Having said that, we already have a lot of knowledge in the body of science when it comes to cognitive control, the anatomy of it, how is it functioning, which parts of the brain are being lit up, for example, during these tasks. So this study is not new per se, but the part that is new is where they focused more on the specific delta as well as theta band frequencies when they had these individuals perform these cognitive control related tasks. In previous studies, it was shown that there was a difference between when the delta band frequency came in and became active, whereas when theta band frequencies came in and became active. But previously, we didn't know where exactly this separation was happening between these two band frequencies. The first thing that this study showed was that both delta and theta band frequencies increased in frontal parietal neural networks. It also showed where exactly in the cognitive control processes, these band frequencies were increased. And so this study showed that not only those two band frequencies are more active, but also there are a multiplex level of neural network that are involved, or regions that are involved, and they all appear to have a job of the distinct part of the cognitive control where they become more or less active. It's worth noting that both delta and theta waves are extremely low band frequencies. They are mainly apparent in humans when we sleep. In fact, where theta increases, that's when we become sleepy. But they are easier to detect and measure in lab rats because they by nature have lower frequencies in their brains than, for example, humans do, obviously. And so they are not as easy to detect in labs. And for example, when you are at a very professional institutional lab, you are equipped with much more sensitive EEG and fMRI machines, hence you're able to detect them a little bit easier. However, theta bands, the same as beta bands that we talked previously when it comes to working memory, is very much correlated with hippocampus activities, and that is also where working memory happens. So a collaboration between hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, we know already that that's how a lot of the working memory functions happen. And so, as we talked earlier, obviously beta bands is increased, but in this case, theta also has a lot of activities there when it comes to hippocampal activities. As you already know, science moves very slowly. We already know a lot, but we also still do not know a lot. So these are all baby steps that scientists are taking in order to increase our understanding about the human psychology and human brain in general.